And now I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Teresa Flores, a Peruvian lawyer and a trusted colleague. Teresa currently leads the Observatory of Religious Freedom in Latin America. Teresa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to John, Ariel, to the Canopy Forum team and the International Institute for Religious Freedom for taking the initiative and providing us the opportunity to discuss these different scenarios that impact the exercise of religious freedom. So the topic that I present in my essay is how organized crime can regulate different aspects of the right to religious freedom. And I have taken Mexico as a case study to develop these ideas. So unfortunately, Mexico continues to be a country in which criminal groups control important territories and even communities. So according to some organizations, some solid organizations like the Global Organized Crime Index 2023, Mexico ranks third out of 193 countries in terms of the scope of criminal operations. Groups like the Sinaloa Cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or the Gulf Cartel lead drug, arms, human trafficking, money laundering, and other illegal activities. And while doing so, the right of religious freedom, as understood according to Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, as well as Article 12 and 13 of the American Convention of Human Rights, is being severely limited. As religious leaders are seen as important allies in the construction of communities, the construction of societies, they come to have a strong popular legitimacy, and they influence the attitudes, the behavior of members of these communities. And sometimes religious leaders become the only link between citizens and the government. And in contexts of crisis or conflict, religious leaders act as mediators in favor of peace, in favor of justice, and for this reason, in areas with little or no presence of the state, in areas that are controlled by organized crime groups, the leadership of religious leaders and the role that they play is perceived as a direct competition to criminal authorities and criminal interests. So pastoral activities with a social or political connotation that goes against this criminal logic in areas where violence, where insecurity prevail, put the integrity of religious leaders, parishioners, and even their families at risk. And in this context, they become victims of harassment, death threats, kidnappings, extortion, and even murder. And sometimes attacks can also be directed at their places of worship. So between January to September 2024, the Observatory of Religious Freedom Latin America, through the Violent Incident Database, registered 21 killings among religious leaders, including Catholics and evangelicals, lay people, and catechists, around 100 abductions, and around 186 religious leaders and members of congregations that have been threatened or physical assaulted, not to mention 107 places of worship or religious buildings that have been destroyed, vandalized, or closed. So if we consider this broad content of the right to religious freedom, if we acknowledge its multidimensional aspect, we will see that these criminal activities, in addition to affect the human security of those affected, will affect also, and not only the right to worship, but also various intersecting rights like freedom of conscience, freedom of association, freedom of assembly, and freedom of expression. We can mention some examples. For instance, the right to religious observance, or the right to assemble in connection with a religion or belief, or to celebrate religious holidays, are limited when criminal groups restrict church services, when they conduct ongoing monitoring of church leaders and members, or even threaten to close churches for not paying extortion fees. Sometimes missionary or social work activities are also hindered by intimidation and threats from criminal groups, and even the impediment of access to disputed territories make this missionary work even hard to put it off. Even religious proselytism, understood as the possibility of communicating with individuals, with communities on issues related to faith, can be restricted if the content of the sermons, if the content of the publications by religious leaders is uncomfortable or results in criticism or denunciation of the activities of criminal groups. And in this context, one of the conclusions of my essay is that to comprehensively understand the effects of organized crime and criminal activities in a specific territory, it is necessary to consider how they affect different groups in vulnerable situations. Not just these common groups that, of course, suffer the consequences of violence, like the poor populations, children, youth, women, ethnic minorities, etc., but religious leaders need to be also considered as victims. There is a poor recognition of the obstacles they face in exercising their right to religious freedom fully, and I think that it is absolutely necessary to pay attention to this if we want to achieve a better understanding and protection of the right to religious freedom, not just in Mexico, but also in other Latin American countries where violence and insecurity caused by organized crime are a real issue and have a real impact on the exercise on this right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for sharing these insights.